Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Network Management Megatrends 2024, Skill Gaps, Hybrid and Multi-Cloud, SASE, and AI-Driven Operations. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, Vice President of Research covering Network Management at EMA. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AIOps-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. And before I hand things over to Shamus, I wanted the audience to know that Shamus will be wrapping up his presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback, as well as a link to this new research report. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for joining me today. So I am the head of EMA's Network Infrastructure and Operations practice, and I survey thousands of IT professionals per year and interview dozens and dozens of people one-on-one just to keep track of what enterprises are doing with their networks, how they design, build, manage them. And one of the flagship research projects I do is Network Management Megatrends, which is something that EMA has been publishing since 2008 and that I've been doing since 2016, I think. And it's a multi-sponsor research project. So on the screen, you see the sponsors of this year's edition. You got Alkira, which does multi-cloud networking and cloud interconnect as a service and has a global backbone. You got Blue Cat, a very well-known DNS, DHCP, and IP address management vendor. And then you've got Broadcom and IBM, which do a lot, but the interest in sponsorship is coming from their network observability product teams for the most part. And then you see Kentic, Live Action, Netscale, Progress all do network observability, network performance monitoring solutions. NetAlly does handheld network testing equipment, like cable testers, Ethernet testers, Wi-Fi analyzers, and Nokia. They do a lot as well. You might think of them as a telecom vendor. They also do data center networking solutions and other things. So all of them provided financial support for this independent research. So let's start off with research goals and methodology. This is the definitive benchmarking study of network management. It's our flagship report for my practice. So we've got 16 years of data to look at when we do this research now. And you'll see some trending. I'm not going all the way back to 2008, but because I don't know how many of the questions from 2008 we still ask, but there are quite a few questions we ask every 2 years in this report. So there's a lot of trending. It represents thousands and thousands of IT organizations that we survey over the years, hundreds of people that we talked to one-on-one. The goals for 2024 were one, something we do every 2 years with this report, track evolving network management strategies and tool requirements to understand like how people are evolving NetOps. Do they even still call it NetOps, network operations? Explore issues around personnel shortages. That's something we've been looking at in recent years. Difficulty in hiring people with networking skills, for instance, and retaining them. And also, as we do every 2 years, these kind of change from year to year, but we try to identify the impacts of new technologies that or maturing technologies that are having an impact on how enterprises manage their networks. And in this year's report, we looked specifically at hybrid multi-cloud, secure access service edge, and AI ops or AI and ML driven network management. This is a peek at who we surveyed. We surveyed a little over 400 people in IT roles that ranged from network admin or network engineer all the way up to CIO level. Roughly about half were in a technical role of some kind. The rest were middle management or executives. And also companies of all sizes, from small, medium to very large enterprise. We set a minimum floor of 500 global employees and 50 million in annual revenue. Anyone smaller or less um, uh, rich than that were disallowed from the survey. There are about 12 industries, or maybe 15. You can see top industries were finance, insurance, manufacturing, healthcare, retail. And you can also see that we surveyed a bunch of different functional groups in IT, including network engineering and network operations, but also IT architecture, IT service management, project management, cloud engineering. And it's a transatlantic view. On this coast, or this side of the Atlantic, it was the United States and Canada, and on the other side, it was the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. So first thing I want to talk about is the state of network operations through a variety of lenses. First, what are the strategic drivers of networking and network operations in the enterprise today? We ask this question every year. I think this does go back to 2008, the technical initiatives that drive network operations. We give them a multiple choice list of 12, 15 things that we think are current or, emerging or maybe declining. It changes from year to year a little bit, but not by much. We might add one or two things, subtract one or two things, but for the most part, it's a list of things that they've seen in the previous year or two. And so on the left here, you see these are the 5 top responses to the question, right? So it's public cloud, software as a service. So the top things are very cloud oriented. And then you got DevOps and continuous integration and continuous deployment, number 3. And that was brand new in terms of a top response. In previous years is more like towards the bottom of the list. This year it had risen to the top 3. And then you see cross-domain operations and full stack observability. So that tells you that NetOps teams are starting to think about integrating operations with other functional groups in the organization, and given the top responses to this, they're probably thinking about integrating with like the cloud team, the DevOps team, but also security probably, because what's the next response? Zero trust. So zero trust was, I believe, 9th in 2022, and now it's 5th. That tells me that network teams are starting to reorient their focus towards supporting zero trust. And I'm going to do additional research on this later in the year. We didn't really look at it that much in this report because I wasn't expecting it to be this high. But yeah, that tells you that they're thinking about modernizing things like secure remote access and network segmentation and observability to support that. On the right, you see what are the networking projects that you're investing in right now? Like what is top of the list of the things that you're trying to invest in and implement to keep your approach to networking modern and supporting business. And the number 1 response was network security. It's always network security. Every year, it's network security. And then hybrid multi-cloud networking solutions. So they're trying to implement connectivity between the data centers and their clouds, but also among their clouds. And then network automation and network observability, also known in some contexts or many contexts as network performance management. So those are the things that they're thinking about. They're trying to improve the security of their networks. They're trying to cloudify their networks. They're trying to automate their networks, and they're trying to get better visibility into their networks. Incidentally, I should go back to the left on the slide and just for historical purposes point out that that when we ask the question technical, what are the technical initiatives that are driving your priorities for how you manage and monitor your networks. That's actually the full wording of that question, if I'm remembering it correctly. From 2008 to 2020, so for 12 straight years, well, every 2 years, but for over a 12-year span, the top response to that question was always the same. It was always server virtualization. Every year, from going back to 2008, they told us that server virtualization was the most dominant driver of how they think about managing and monitoring networks. So they were trying to figure out how to improve visibility into things like VM to VM traffic on a server, how they're trying to improve like east-west traffic in a data center. Like, okay, most of the traffic used to be north-south oriented in my data center. Now it's east-west. So that was the conversations that were dominating their meetings and their buying decisions and things like that from 2008 to 2020. And then in 2022, when we asked that question, server virtualization disappeared. It dropped down to around 11th on the list of things that were drivers, and were replaced by public cloud and software as a service, which until then had been sort of middle of the pack things. And server virtualization obviously remains off the top of the list of things that they're thinking about in 2024. It's still all about cloud, about DevOps, about cross-domain ops, and now zero trust. What does that tell you? Well, the data center is no longer the center of their focus anymore. They're really focused on the cloud and hybrid cloud and hybrid multi-cloud. It's not just about figuring out how to organize NetOps around server virtualization. It's bigger than that now. It's the hybrid multi-cloud. So that's a big takeaway from this slide, and I spent enough time on it. So we also are seeing that a lot of people are moving towards or away from the traditional Independent Network Operations Center, or NOC. So this is a question we've been asking for a while. And you're seeing here the answers for 2022 and this year, 2024. Which of the following best describes the way in which your organization primarily conducts network monitoring and management? And you see number of organizations that just outsource that function primarily is relatively flat. It's declined slightly, but it's pretty much hasn't really changed a lot. Distributed informal, otherwise like, technicians and engineers just access tools from wherever they are. They're not really a group. They're just, working in tools. That's definitely flat. But you see the shifts here. Formal independent NOCs declined by 5%. And integrated into a converged cross-domain operations center increased by 7%. So there is an apparent shift towards breaking silos and integrating the network operations function into a cross-domain ops center of some kind. And that's kind of what we saw on this slide here, the number 4 driver, cross-domain operations, full stack observability. So it's a theme, obviously. All right, so another piece of network operations is what some people might refer to as field ops, field operations. The act of getting out of your chair and solving problems in the physical space of your network. 86% of the people in our survey told us that they send technicians into the field with a portable device of some kind for analysis at least once per month. What are they usually carrying when they do that? Well, the majority of them are sending people out with a Wi-Fi testing software of some kind on a laptop or mobile device, like an iPhone. One guy told me he's got one dedicated handheld Wi-Fi analysis tool, and then he's got like 4 or 5 other guys that go out with a laptop with an iPhone with Wi-Fi testing software on it. So he does a little bit of both. And then 52% said they go out with handheld Ethernet testers or cable testers. Around half also said they go out with a dedicated Wi-Fi, a little less than half go out with like a dedicated Wi-Fi testing device. And then fewer than that, a minority said that they will send people out with a laptop that has like something like Wireshark on it to just like plug in and analyze packets from a physical interface. Why are they doing this? Well, troubleshooting or trying to recreate user experience issues was actually the least common thing they do when they send people out in the field. What they're actually focused on is verifying network documentation, validating network segmentation, and doing periodic site assessments and audits. Like, oh, how is our Wi-Fi coverage in this space? You know, are we seeing any interference from anything? Did someone plug a microwave in over here? Stuff like that. And overall, this is good news. Every 2 years since 2016, I've been asking people, how would you characterize the overall success of your efforts around network operations over the last year? And these are the percentages of people who gave themselves an unqualified A grade. We're successful. We're not somewhat successful. We're not feeling neutral. We're not unsuccessful. We can say unequivocally that we are doing as well as we'd like to be doing. And what you see here is we were seeing some kind of crisis. From 2016, 2018, everything looked okay. You know, like half of the enterprises were telling us that they're doing good, right? And then in 2020, incidentally, that was a survey in 2020 that was conducted a month or two before the pandemic started. So it wasn't the pandemic that tripped this off. We saw a decline to 35%, which was concerning. And then I did it again in 2022 and it dropped to 27%. And I was like, what's going on here? And, you know, we identified certain things in 2022 that we thought were causing those troubles, and we'll really revisit those again in this research to some extent. But clearly there are things that were going wrong. Now, I will point out that in 2022, people were, for the first time, telling us that they were no longer focused on server virtualization. They were focused on cloud and stuff like that. And maybe that had something to do with it. But in 2024, we got a rebound. Like, people are doing better. It's kind of looks like the economy over the last 10 years. But yeah, so that's good. People are doing better with NetOps. But I see warning signs. So let's look at those warning signs by the percentages. What you see here are some mean responses to questions that we've been asking year to year. And the first one here, the top row, the magenta, I asked them, could you characterize roughly the percentage of the alerts coming out of your tools that are actionable as opposed to just noise or false alarms? And you see that noise is going up 57% in 2020, 66% of alerts in 2022, 71% of alerts in this year. So the tools are getting noisier, which is problematic because people tell me they spend a lot of time tuning their alerts to get rid of that noise. And they've been, you know, tuning them manually, but also applying in some instances AI technology. But there's a problem here. The next row, which I think might be brown, tell us what percentage of the errors, what percentage of the problems on your network, downtime, performance degradation, are caused by manual administrative errors, such as a configuration change. Now, there's another analyst firm out there that's been saying it's like 75% for a very long time. And a lot of my clients on the vendor side like to cite that number. But what I see here is it's never really been that high. But it is rising, which is of concern. It's not rising as intensely as the white noise coming out of tools, but it is rising. So it's 26% in 2020, it's 27% in 2022. Now it's popped up. It's accelerated a little bit here in 2024 to 30%. So that tells you that they're struggling with network compliance. There's still too many manual changes being done on their network. So it's a concern, and it's growing. The last question represented here in the blue is a question I've only been asking since 2022, hence the lack of a 2020 number. How many network problems would go away if you had better network management tools? What percentage of your problems would go away? And so in 2022, they said it would be 44%. 2024, 53%. What's that tell you? People are becoming more aware of the fact that the tools that they have are not good enough. That's my guess. All right, next up, biggest barriers to network operations success, a question we ask every 2 years. This shortage of skilled personnel, it was like I think it was like second or third in 2022, and here you see it's now number one by a mile. It just is much bigger problem than everything else on this list. And then the big secondary ones are insufficient budget, tool fragmentation or tool bloat, like we've got too many tools, and then lack of network standards. These are our golden configs, these are design standards. Do we have that? Some people don't. And poor data quality, which was actually number one I believe in 2022. Now it's dropped down to a soft secondary one. But overall, you see tool fragmentation is getting worse, budget is becoming more of a problem, and ineffective network management outsourcing, which is lower end overall, but it has risen from the bottom this year. And then network data quality and cross-domain cooperation were big fallers this year. Ineffective cross-domain cooperation and decision-making was sort of middle of the pack in 2022. Now it's bottom of the list. But the big takeaway here is people are definitely feeling the skill shortage, and they're struggling with budget and tool load and standards and stuff. Tool fragmentation, actually, selecting that in this question correlated very strongly with less success with overall network operations. Also, people who worked in a technical role, like an admin, engineer, architect, IT business analyst, project manager type, working close with the network technology. Those people were more likely to call out the lack of network standards as a problem. And also, towards the bottom of the list, a lack of defined processes for network operations. Those are two big ones for the techies who are working most closely with networks. So we referenced the skill shortage being the top complicating factor for network operations success. Here is the question asked more directly. Does your organization find it difficult or easy to find, hire, and retain personnel with network technology expertise? So we asked this question for the first time in 2022. We asked it again in 2024, and things have gotten worse. The number of people who thought it was very easy has declined. It was not that high to begin with. People who thought it was somewhat easy also declined significantly. And those who see it as somewhat to very difficult have increased a lot. So there's trouble here. The largest enterprises in our survey, people with 10,000 or more employees in their organization, they struggled the most with hiring. On the right, you see what the skills are that they're finding most difficult to find and keep. Network security is number one. It was number one in 2022 as well. Network monitoring and troubleshooting was number two. Those were separate options in the multiple choice in 2022. I combined them this year. Some of you might see why I did that. Some of you might disagree, but I combined it, and that caused them as a group to rise up to number two. And network automation was number two in 2022. Now it's pretty much holding steady at number three. And you see data center networking and public cloud networking, which are both uh, playing similar roles in a digital enterprise, the home of applications and data, are also in the top 5. Things that were less critical to find or difficult to find were things like basic switching and routing skills, working with SD-WAN, Wi-Fi skills, DDI, IPv6. Those are easier to hire for, or just not a priority. The IPv6, probably no one's like, oh, I can't find any IPv6 experts. That's not a big deal. But yeah, so it's security, it's basic monitoring, troubleshooting of the network, and automation. And automation, we gave examples such as, do you have like people who know Python, or do you need people who can use your off-the-shelf automation tools or whatever? So that's where the pain is in the skill set. And then tools. This question we've been asking for longer than I've been at EMA. How many tools does a network operations team use to, for network monitoring, management, troubleshooting? The answer to this question has always been roughly 4 to 15. That's where like the gravity of the responses have always been, as you can see in the brown, the 2022 numbers. That gravity shifted a little bit. There's been consolidation. There's just a lot more people getting by with 3 to 5 tools, and a lot fewer people that are reporting using 11 or more. So that's good. Consolidation has happened. Network teams, there are a couple interesting like cross-tabular analysis things that I saw here when I sliced the data by this question. First, network teams with larger tool sets, they told us that they spent more time, like that their networking people spent more time per day on troubleshooting issues. So it's could be inferred from that a large sprawling tool set without like central visibility and management makes the process of troubleshooting and remediating problems less efficient. People who have large tool sets also told us that they had that a higher percentage of their network problems were caused by manual errors. That's not very surprising to me, and actually we saw that in 2022 as well. On the inverse side, people that had larger tool sets told us they were doing better with network operations overall, which is counterintuitive and has something we saw in 2022 and 2020 as well. And it's always kind of perplexed me that people are doing better with larger tool sets when we see so many indicators in the data that they're less efficient and less effective. But that's what the data says. So the takeaway from that is like you can feel successful even with a large tool set, because actually if you have a large tool set, that means like a lot of your people are empowered to use the tools that they want to use as opposed to being forced to use tools that they don't like. But there are problems with it, like you're not as efficient and you're prone to making errors. So it's a trade-off. Also, budget was an issue that was called out in the overall challenges slide. I just wanted to zoom in a little bit. 21% of the NetOps teams represented in our survey told us that low prices are a major factor in the tools that they buy to manage and monitor their networks. So that's, they're looking for lower price tools, a lot of them, 1 in 5. And that can undermine things. And 27% told us that one of the main reasons that they're interested in consuming a tool as a SaaS-based offering, software as a service offering, rather than deploying it or managing it themselves, is because those SaaS vendors offer transparent pricing, and they like being able to see the cost of something more clearly. So that's telling you that, budget is something that's really painful for a lot of organizations. And here are a couple of quotes from people I talked to one-on-one. On the right, a network engineering director at a very large insurance company that's got hundreds and hundreds of sites. He says there's some investments that make sense to a network operations person like himself, but they don't make sense to the person who would write the check, the CIO, or his underlings. He specifically told me that he was trying to get $50,000 to buy an IP address management tool. And his his superior said, just use a spreadsheet. And he's like, I like to think that I'm really good at translating technology into business speak, and I just couldn't get it done with this. So, and he was like, I'm not using a spreadsheet. Forget this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He he chose an open source IPAM tool instead, and asked one of his network engineers who knows how to code to modify it to fit their needs. But he said like he said if I was gonna like give myself a grade on 1 to 5 on how good my team is doing with network operations, I give ourselves a 3.5, at least on the spectrum of like how IP address space impacts operations. But if I was able to use a commercial enterprise grade solution instead of this open source tool, I'd give myself a 5 on that. That's straight from his mouth. And then this network engineer at a Fortune 500 aerospace and defense company told me a lot of people have declined our offers because of pay. So like his company is lowballing on hires, offering lower salaries, and they're being outbidded. He says here, one guy declined on the day he was supposed to start because he got a better offer at the last minute. That sucks. Anyway, let's look at what's impacting you guys. Impacts of hybrid and multi-cloud and secure access service edge. I kind of bundled these together for reasons in this presentation. They get their own chapters in the report. So most network operations teams are encountering hybrid and or multi-cloud networks. So 77% of the companies in our survey told us that they're using at least one public cloud provider, infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. And 51% said they had hybrid infrastructure. They had both a public cloud provider, at least one, and they also had a private data center, either like an on-prem data center, one or more that they operated on their own, or they had a colo provider, or many of them were doing both of those. And then 56% said they were multi-cloud. They had 2 or more cloud providers, usually AWS and Azure. So back in the day, 6, 8 years ago, when I talked to people who were in network engineering, network operations groups about cloud, they're like, well, it's less for me to deal with because they just take those apps, they take that data out of the data center and they move it to the cloud, and they don't want me to touch it. They don't want me to do anything with it. They might want me to do like a direct connect into AWS so that the data center and the cloud are connected for reasons. And I can manage that with limited visibility into long-term capacity requirements because I don't know what's going on out there in the cloud. But I don't care about the cloud because that's their problem. That was 6 or 8 years ago. And then like things started happening, like performance problems, downtime, breaches, and CIOs started growling about all this trouble. And now NetOps teams are engaged with the cloud. 98% of network teams told us that they try to monitor public cloud networks. What are they using? Well, 70% are using the monitoring and reporting offered by cloud providers. Not surprising, that's where they started. But you see like a lot of them are going past that. 58% said they're actually deploying new tools specifically, at least in part, to address the fact that they need better visibility into cloud networks. The traffic, the routing, maybe the security aspects of it. And 44% said they're applying their incumbent tools, the tools that they've traditionally used to monitor their on-premise networks. They're extending that onto the cloud. Like, wow, the SNMP monitoring tool can pull certain types of metrics from the cloud, depending on the implementation. Those metrics are useful or somewhat useful. Some of them are trying to capture traffic. It's Wild West to some extent, but that's what they're trying to do. Now, when we talk about multi-cloud, I think a lot of the people I talk to will tell me like, well, these are siloed. I got one cloud team that wants to be in Azure, another cloud team that wants to be in AWS. And then that first cloud team told me they want like a DR environment in Google, but like there's not a lot of stuff going on between that. It's all just siloed stuff. But that's kind of changing as well. So everyone that told us that they were in the cloud and or had a mix of cloud and data center hybrid. I'm sorry, everyone that told us they had more than one cloud provider and or had a mix of public and private. So either they're hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, or both. We asked them this question. I know that's complex, but I wrote the logic in the survey and it worked. Is your organization trying to do any of the following across your hybrid and or multi-cloud environment? And not surprising, because this is like one of the first things network engineers did for their cloud teams. They established hybrid cloud connectivity. So connectivity between public cloud and data center. And how exactly they use that? Is it just like a central point for security screening before user traffic goes in the cloud? I think that's where it started, but I think increasingly there's a lot of application traffic passing back and forth over those hybrid connections. And 54%-ish, almost 54% said that they're trying to have an end-to-end approach to network monitoring and troubleshooting, which tells you there's a lot of application traffic happening between clouds, but also just they want to see how things are going from the user to the data center to the cloud to another cloud and back again. And then end-to-end security controls, network security controls, like, hey, let's have some uniformity around how we do firewalling across our different cloud providers and between our data center and our cloud. Can we have the same vendor for that? Can we have one policy set for that? And then almost 40% said that they're interested in doing end-to-end multi-cloud network connectivity fabrics. So like those true multi-cloud networking solutions that sort of pull everything together so you have one network. So you can have things like consistent routing, consistent approaches to like VLANs and subnets and security controls and things like that. You see here, basically 98% were doing one of these, but most of them are doing two. And then how effective are those efforts on the left of this slide? You see on the right, we asked them that, and almost 39% said very effective. The rest, we could be doing better. No one, very few, or less than 1% said they're even somewhat ineffective. But so everyone's having pretty good results, giving themselves Bs basically on how they do all this stuff. 99% of the enterprises in this survey said they had secure access service edge adoption plans. I think about 49% were actually in production with something that they described as SASE. The rest were like in the middle of implementing or planning something. So pretty universal engagement with the technology, and that's good, I guess. But I've done a lot of research on SASE over the last 2 years, and it's not easy. And one of the problems is like it's just complex, because I find that like 2/3 of the enterprises that I survey from over I've done a couple different surveys on this, but like two-thirds in general, 2/3 of the enterprises that I hear from are doing multi-vendor SASE. They're not adopting a single platform, which is what everyone's trying to sell you. They're adopting multi-vendor solutions, which is a source of that complexity, or they're adopting a vendor that is that has established a SASE solution through multiple acquisitions. So like depending on when you engage with them, it's like you're working with multiple vendors, even though you're sending all your money to one vendor. But one of the first things I wanted to investigate in this research was just SASE observability, because I've been hearing rumblings about it and seeing rumblings about it in other research, but like, are you able to see things like you used to? And the answer to that question is no. First off, how do you observe SASE? What's your observability strategy? So 55% said that they're leaning on the native monitoring capabilities of their SASE solution. That's pretty low. considering that like SD-WAN, which is, I think, the foundation of SASE, was known when it first came to market for having native monitoring in it, and that supposedly made like operations simpler. But the reality was almost everyone I talked to monitors SD-WAN with a third-party tool, and the same is this case with SASE. And you see here, 61% of people told us that they have adopted new network monitoring solutions just to address SASE observability, among other things. Probably what they're really telling you here is like, yeah, we got SD-WAN, and then we realized that we needed to buy a new tool to improve visibility into certain things, and now we're doing SASE. I think we're doing SASE. I don't know. I think it's SASE. What is SASE? Well, it's it's an architecture that integrates SD-WAN with cloud delivered security solutions. I think that's the simplest way of describing it. Some people would have multiple caveats to that, like, oh, well, also all the security has to be a single pass architecture and stuff like that. And that's fine. But that's in reality, that's not what a lot of people are doing. Anyway, before I digress, you see here 39% adopted their or adapted their incumbent monitoring tools to support SASE observability. Now on the right, only 37% of people described their SASE monitoring efforts as very effective, which is pretty consistent with what I've seen with SD-WAN as well. A lot of people would like to be doing better. Here we asked a question, what are your biggest operational challenges with SASE? These are the top 5 responses. Managing security policies and controls. Now, when you think about it, since I mentioned a lot of people doing multi-vendor SASE, they might have more than one security vendor involved in their SASE architecture. Also, like one of those security vendors might be the SD-WAN vendor. They're like, oh, well, using our SD-WAN vendor for firewalls. And then we have firewalls as a service in the SASE cloud as well. And we're trying to coordinate those. Don't ask me why we have firewalls at the edge and in the cloud, but that's what we're doing. So yeah, they're having trouble managing security policies and controls. Number 2, they don't have great visibility into the health and performance of the SASE points of presence, where the places in the ether that your SASE vendor or vendors host all their security capabilities. Like, it's basically, you could think of it as like a software as a service environment, and these guys want to see how the health of that stuff is impacting overall experience on the network, because if something's wrong with that POP, it's going to definitely add latency to the connection and the application transaction interaction. It could just drop traffic. So that's something they're trying to get better handle on. They're also trying to manage integrations between SASE components. As I mentioned, there's a lot of multi-vendor out there. So that's causing trouble for them. And then visibility into traffic between the SASE POP and the cloud. One guy actually randomly started talking to me about this when I was asking him about like his overall network operations challenges. He started complaining about this very issue. Like, he's adopting new tools so that he can try to get better visibility into what's going on with his traffic after it leaves a SASE point of presence and goes towards his cloud. Like, he can't see that. And then a lot of people told us that they're struggling to minimize the amount of latency coming from these SASE points of presence. And specifically, like, for example, like, is your traffic going to the most like ideal SASE POP that is offered by your SASE vendor? Like, let's say you've got users in New York, and one day, like like for some reason, all their traffic is going to a SASE POP in Paris instead of New Jersey, and suddenly there's just a ton of latency on your network, and you've got to like figure out why. And then you're like, why is all this traffic going across the Atlantic? What happened? Well, something went wrong with our SASE vendor, and they started routing traffic differently. So like, that's something I keep an eye on. Okay, rounding out, we're turning the corner here towards the end. AI and ML driven network management. It's mainstream. So artificial intelligence and machine learning is starting to transform network operations. 64% of the people in this survey told us that they have adopted some kind of AI and ML capability from a network infrastructure vendor or a network management vendor to enhance, optimize, automate network management to some extent. So that's pretty high. Now, some of them might think they're doing it, and they're not really, because their vendors have AI washed them. But yeah, that 64% say we're definitely doing it, and then I think around 33% said they're interested or planning to use something like this. And then the use case that was of most interest to them was security threat detection. A lot of security vendors are talking about fighting AI attacks with AI, so that's not surprising. It's like really a hot topic right now. And then 37% are looking at sort of self-healing stuff. Like, I would love to be able to automatically resolve problems. And I've seen multiple vendors come to market with like runbook editors on top of their AI ops capability, where they come basically like triggering an automated workflow in response to an AI insight, and like you approve that that's something you're cool with, and it happens. And then 33% are just looking for some root cause analysis and problem isolation, like basic network troubleshooting enhanced by AI. And 31% said they're really just interested in like an anomaly detection and analysis capability, which is a little more general than something like network troubleshooting or security threat detection. It's just like, help us find the anomalies, and then we'll dig into the data ourselves. On the bottom of this slide, you see we asked people, like, how do you think this will change the way network operations happens in your organization as you consume these AI things? 61% said that it's going to enhance and expand the level of network automation in their organization, which is nice. And 57% said it's going to make their skilled network engineers more efficient in how they work, which is good, since it's really hard to find those people, as we saw earlier in the survey. And then 56% said that their lower skilled technicians are going to be able to take on more complex tasks and won't have to escalate as much to those skilled engineers. So that's good. Those are 3 good things that are happening. So those are the highlights of the research. It's not everything that's in the research. It's a 60-page report based on a 20-minute survey, dozens of questions. So the full report has a lot of data and analysis on a bunch of other things that you can dig into if you want to download it, such as how are network teams breaking down silos, what tools do they share? I mean, who do they share their tools with in other groups, and how they make that happen? What are the most critical platform and feature requirements of your tools? Like, and what would you like your tool vendors to automate more in their platforms so that you can be more efficient? Is cloud rate repatriation a thing, and is it impacting you? Why is synthetic network monitoring mainstream now? Because the majority of people in this survey said they're doing synthetic network monitoring. So explores that engagement and what they're doing with it. And why are network teams not ready for streaming telemetry, which some of the people I talk to one-on-one, I have to define it for them because they never even heard of it, but others are familiar with it and have lots of reservations. But most of the people in this survey have been using it to some extent, but 3/4 of them tell us they're just playing with it to get a sense of what it can do. They're not really adopting it widely, and they're not really trying to replace SNMP anytime soon, which is something that theoretically could happen if everyone really embraced streaming telemetry. But they are starting to understand the business value of it. Like 2 years ago, one of the biggest inhibitors of embracing streaming telemetry was a lack of clarity on the business value of it. But this year, that was like the least shows in response, and they're really more focused on other things that were holding them back, like skills, platform upgrades, things like that. So that's it from me. And here's where you can download the report. Some of the sponsors bought distribution rights to it as well. So if you Google the report, you might find a download link from one of them if they posted it already. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh for Q&A.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions, so there's a lot of interest in this topic. We'll see how many of these questions we can get through, Shamus. The first one is, it's kind of a multi-part, but I'll ask the first part. What do you mean by cross-domain ops? What does this include?
Well, I didn't define it for them in the context of the survey, so it was open to interpretation by the survey taker. I think cross-domain ops is about it's multidisciplinary. That was actually in the context of the question. Multidisciplinary cross-domain operations. So it's not just about a bunch of people in a NOC with network monitoring tools. It's a bunch of people from different functional groups or functional backgrounds, like application operations, network operations, perhaps security, cloud, systems, storage, people from different disciplines in IT working together as a group, so that instead of having a war room to solve problems where representatives of different teams like meet over Zoom to figure out whose fault it is that something's not working, they actually just have tools and processes in place to work together to solve problems and respond to issues efficiently. That's my definition.
Thanks, Shamus. Another question about cross-domain operations came in. It is, do you feel that the growth of cross-domain operations centers, functions is leading to networking teams no longer making independent choices about their network monitoring tools or solutions?
I mean, it's hard to generalize that because it really depends on the organization. Like some organizations I talk to, the network teams have never had complete independence because there's an IT tool engineering team that's trying to dictate terms there. They'll be like, you must standardize on this tool set. Here's the monitoring tool for networks. But yes, I think there's probably some cases where network teams are having less independence in how they decide what tool they're going to use as this shift happens. Although I think a lot of teams will like bring their preferred tool to the table and say, here's what we use. I'm going to share it with you guys. What do you use? Should we consolidate on something, or should we use the tools that we know how to use and just, rely on like an AI ops platform, an event management platform to sort of like correlate events from all our tools, which actually happens quite a bit. Like a lot of times when I ask a NetOps guy or network engineering director, like, would you use AI ops at all? And they'll be like, well, yeah, we got this event correlation stuff. And that's where I send all the data from my tools, So it's pretty complex. I think you'll see it, and I don't think the standalone NOCs are just going away completely. Like, I think the larger companies in our survey were less likely to be doing that. Because they have much more specialized groups that are serving certain functions, but even those companies, in those cases, those companies are more likely to have an IT tool engineering team that is sort of leading the way. But if you talk to those IT tool engineering teams, this is like another dynamic. You talk to an IT tool engineering guy, and he'll tell you like, yeah, I adopted this one vendor, and it does storage monitoring and network monitoring and application performance monitoring and all this stuff. And so like I said to all the teams and operations, like, this is your tools, this is a suite. It's all integrated. So like you guys can work together and share dashboards and reports and stuff. And then I ask like, oh, so you got rid of all your old tools? And he says like, well, no. No, those tools are still there. They're still there. we can't really eradicate all of them. Like some of them, like some teams just like their old tools and they just keep using them, and there's nothing I can do to get rid of it, even though like I'm the boss of tools. So yeah, it's pretty complex.
Thanks, Shamus. Is the insufficient budget issue you discussed clouded by or made worse by the shift from perpetual models to subscription models, mostly CapEx to completely OpEx?
I think some people are feeling that. It's kind of like a parallel dynamic to the cloud, um, and other things that are OpEx focused rather than CapEx. And yeah, I think some people might be seeing that over time. And but I noted on one slide that like one of the things that draws people to SaaS tools is so-called transparent monitoring and licensing, right? So if they can see that, they can do like a 5-year cycle and or a projection to see like and try to compare. I see some vendors that are continue to stick with having software as a service and on-prem offerings for a variety of reasons. One being that like they just have a lot of customers that refuse to have their data in the cloud, but I think it also gives their customers sort of flexibility in how they pay for something. Although I will say, despite the fact that there is a lot of um, budget tightness in the market, when you ask people, what's your preferred um, license model? Perpetual licenses are just no one. The interest in them is declining. Like subscription is of more interest, and I think part of that is that people are not people are ready to switch tools to get a better deal and to chase innovation and other things. This research, if you download the report and read it, we asked the question, how likely are you to replace a network management tool over the next 2 years? And I think it was like 3/4 of them that said that they were pretty open to it. And when I ask people one-on-one, they're like, yeah, I'm not loyal to any of my tools. If someone offers something that's cheaper, better, I'll take a look at it. Now, the theory of that and the actual process of replacing a tool can be painful. But anyway, people are very interested in subscription models for their tools, and they're very open to switching tools. And I think that might be the sort of like the arbitrage thing, like, oh well, I've been using this tool for 3 years and it's starting to feel a little expensive. Their licenses have changed in a way that made it a little more expensive. I'm gonna go this other tool because they're offering me 20% off list. So I'll do that for 2 years and then maybe I'll switch to something else. I mean, there's a lot of factors, complicating factors behind that, but I think that could be something that happens in the future.
Great. Thank you, Shamus. That does bring us to the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the event. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's event, so be sure to check that email out. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.